All right. Thank you, everybody, for joining us tonight for Building Yourself Up, a special teen entrepreneurship workshop with Raya Al-Hashmi, and she is the owner of Raya on Assignment, which is a brand which she does brand photography, and she started that at just 25. So she has lots of insight for us today, and hopefully she inspires you to run with your passions and maybe start your own little business venture. So I'm going to hand it off now to Raya.
Thanks so much, Lauren, and thank you guys for joining. We have Sophia, Avery, and then to Dan. So it's great to have you. Hope you guys are warm. I have a heated blanket where I'm sitting because my apartment is not that toasty. Yeah, so thanks very much for your time. And I'm really excited to share about my story. And hopefully there'll be some tidbits along the way that resonate with you or that you can take away, even if it's one thing. I find that it's often these sorts of events or workshops that really help push me forward, even if it's not in that moment, but it might come years later. So just know that you being here is can be a really huge shift, whether or not you might feel it right away. So I'll just take you guys back to the beginning. I was born in Portland, Oregon, lived there for just a few months, and then I moved to the Middle East, and I lived in a country called Oman. And you may or may not have learned about that already in geography, but it's a small country under Saudi Arabia, and it's right next to Yemen and the United Arab Emirates. So when people ask me what is Oman like, I say it's pretty much the exact opposite of the States in every way you could imagine. But it's an absolutely gorgeous country. So that's where my dad's originally from. So we lived there, and then I moved to England until the age of 8 years old. So if you can imagine, I had an English accent, and it was a super diverse area where we lived. There's a lot of international people. So a lot of my friends and the kids I went to school with were all super diverse. They all came from a lot of different backgrounds, which I didn't realize was unique until I moved here to the seacoast, when I really was the one in my school that looked a little different. But luckily everyone was super accepting, and I moved to Exeter. So just our neighbor here now, and had a great experience there. But what was interesting is I was actually placed in ESL, which is English as a second language. Even though English is my first language, it's my only language. But coming from a different country, where I will say their educational system is different. So I think just to be a little cautious, they put me into this program, whereas with other students who, there's about 4 other students and they did not speak much English at all. And English truly was their second language. So this was, I'm going to talk a little bit about storytelling in this workshop. And this is kind of the first touch point I want to bring up is I was told this story at a very young age that perhaps I was different. Perhaps that English, I wasn't very good at English because here I was placed in with many students that they didn't speak a lick of the language. So I mention this because as I get older, sometimes we can reflect back at these moments in our life and see maybe the stories that we told ourselves or that were told to us and question them and say, are they even true? So as I get older, maybe some of the things I thought about myself or that others thought about me, maybe it's not true. And so perhaps in school or maybe trying out for a sport or something, and an experience may have happened where it made you feel a certain way about yourself, but maybe just question, do you still believe that story? Because sometimes those stories don't help us. Okay. So I'll fast forward a little bit. Did the whole ESL thing, went through elementary school, middle school. I went to cooperative middle school. Some of you may or may not be in that school system. Lauren, would that be fair to say? Or no, are they in like Winnacunnet?
Yeah, I think a lot of people are from Winnacunnet, but we do have people all over New Hampshire.
Right. Okay, cool. Yeah, so and middle school, it's an okay time, right? Sometimes people have a great middle school experience. Other times it's a really hard time in our lives. We're changing, there's a lot of expectations. We don't know which direction we should be going in. There's a lot of influences telling us what we should be and what we shouldn't be. So I would say my middle school was an average experience. Um, but here was a roadblock I had. When eighth grade came, I had the decision: was I going to go to Exeter High School, which is just the traditional path that's in front of us, or was I going to try something different? So because I had an okay middle school experience, I decided to look, what are my other options? And I saw a charter school, which is a high school in Exeter that just gave another option for me, art-based, technology-based. That sparked my interest a little bit, since I was more on the creative side versus someone who loved math or science. I really enjoyed writing, reading, art, stuff like that. So another maybe golden nugget, or if you guys have a pen and paper, your phone, you can write down this sort of idea that sometimes our intuition, which is sort of that voice that will kind of drop into your head, or that feeling you might get in your gut. You hear teachers say, like, go with your first instinct for your answer when you test take. That's the same thing in life. When you have this sort of initial feeling, that's often the one to trust. That's the right one, because the one that comes after is sometimes the outside world telling us which direction we should be going in. So to go back to my story, I had this choice. Was I going to go to a traditional high school, which was the safe sort of path in life? It's the one that was expected. It's the one that people kind of were pushing me toward. Or was I going to take a risk? And often with risk in anything in life, there can be reward. There can also be failure, but you guys might hear that sort of term about there's always lessons we learn in failing, right? So I took a risk and I went to this charter school, and it was an amazing experience, and it was right for me, even though most people were telling me not to go. Sometimes we have to ignore that to listen to our gut, to listen to our instinct. And I tell this story because it was in that high school where I met my best friend, who introduced me to now what I do for work, which is photography. So I really believe if I didn't follow that initial instinct, that initial gut reaction to try something different, I would have perhaps never been introduced to photography in the way that I was, and thus I would not have a business I've built upon something I enjoy so much. So something to think about there is, what happens when we don't follow the path that perhaps we're really being sort of tapped. There's sort of a ping that says, hey, maybe try this. We don't follow that, sometimes we're not going to get introduced to our passions perhaps as quickly. Because some of you might be in this room thinking, okay, so here I am, it's going to be about entrepreneurship, it's going to be about unleashing your innate genius, the things that you're good at. But maybe some of you are thinking, I don't know what I'm good at, I don't feel like I have anything particular that I'm passionate about. And I completely understand that. And I think that can feel frustrating. So sometimes I ask people, well, are you just following maybe the path that's in front of you and the one that's just laid out? Or are you following sometimes your instincts that is trying to lead you toward what your passions are? So this is a little activity. If you guys want to jot down all the things that you feel you're just good at, things that you feel like you can do for hours, and maybe you don't get bored of it, or you feel like time just kind of goes by without you noticing. Sometimes it's things that you feel like you're better at than your peers, and not in a bragging way, but just you feel like they come easy to you. These are all signs of things that perhaps if you followed, you could really unlock something brilliant there. Because for photography, for me to get really good at this, I had to spend over 10,000 hours, right? An insane amount of time I've spent throughout the years to get really good at my craft. And so if you think about it, I wouldn't have wanted to spend all that time doing something that I didn't necessarily feel like I enjoyed, or that time would just kind of pass. Does that make sense? So often when we look at building a business perhaps, or becoming an entrepreneur in something, knowing that you are going to spend so many hours doing this and you have to in order to get good, why not be it something that you already enjoy and believe that you can make money doing that? Another story is perhaps being told you can't make money doing what it is you are good at or what it is you enjoy. A lot of our passions and hobbies, we kind of phrase them as like they're just things we do in the pockets of our time, but we have jobs. So I really love to break down that stereotype a little bit of starving artists and other terms like that, where people don't believe people can make amazing livelihoods based on what it is they love, what it is they're good at. I know for me, if I wasn't doing photography, I wouldn't I wouldn't be as fulfilled in my work. I don't think I would be as successful, or as happy. Used to work in hospitality behind the desk at a hotel, and I remember there were so many moments where my higher ups would get frustrated because they just feel like I couldn't figure things out as quickly as I should be. But of course, I wasn't meant to be there doing that. So I think when we are put in places where we're not really thriving because we're not necessarily good at that, which is not a bad thing. We're all good at different things and we're all not as good at different things. But if we keep putting ourselves in situations where we're not really good at those things, what do we expect the outcome to be? I think, there's a lot to be said about the world working with us when we put in the work as well. So me taking the risk to go to a charter school to then get introduced to photography and then choosing to make it my business, I feel like I have been rewarded in a lot of ways because of the work and the risk I have put in. So I'll go back to high school, right? I meet my best friend, get introduced to photography. And so I start to shoot throughout all of high school. I would just bring it when we went to parties, when we went out and about, when we went exploring. I always had my camera. So it's called the passion, it's called the hobby, when you're just kind of, it's something you incorporate into your life. And then I went to UNH, the University of New Hampshire, where I studied journalism and loved that experience. And again, another maybe tidbit here, I studied something that, again, my friends, my family, my teachers perhaps all kind of questioned, because you don't hear journalists making millions of dollars, right? I didn't say I'm going to go study and go to medical school where maybe I would get applauded, or I'm going to go be a lawyer. I said I'm going to go into journalism, which I believe is an incredible, beautiful career, but it has connotations and it has stories associated with it. But again, I was going against the grain and saying, I don't buy into that story. I don't believe that story. And it's more important for me to follow what it is that I know I enjoy and I get lit up by, versus what I think other people want me to do. Because I had friends who went to school and they went for the degrees that other people were telling them they should go to. And now they're out of school with those degrees and they don't even use them. And maybe they're working at a cafe, which is fine. But they studied something they didn't enjoy for 4 years to then not even use it. So sometimes we do have to go against what our parents say or what our teachers say and really tap into, what do I want to do? What do I enjoy? And understanding when we do that, the money comes, the success comes if we are fully aligned with what it is we want to be doing. I truly wholeheartedly believe that, because I didn't actually at the beginning, when I started off as a photographer, I started my business, I didn't really believe I was going to do much with it. I just wanted to do it. And then I was proven wrong, and I was proven that no, this can be an amazing career. So finished college, and then I shared with you guys the hotel experience. I did a bunch of other jobs actually before I decided to start my business. And then when I was 25 years old, I decided life is not going to get less complicated. And so you guys being here on this call for this workshop, understanding that sometimes we think being young is a bad thing, that it is us not having enough experience, or that people won't take us seriously, or that only older people start businesses. And I truly believe when you are young, that is the best time to start a business. Because again, life does not get less complicated. You don't have less divorces, less mortgages, less children the older you get. So when you are young, and I believe especially the generation that is now before us, you all are brilliant. You understand how the world works. You are willing to do business in a different way. You do it smarter. You do it in a way that's more effortless. And so really, even as me being 29 years old and the older folks I work with, I think we look at you guys as like, they really get it. Like, we need young people on our teams. But that, yeah, being on someone's team, that's an option, but also building your own team is an incredible option too. Okay, let me just pause here for a moment. Feel free if you guys want to unmute yourself, if you want to chime in, if you want to say anything. I know we will leave time for Q&A, but feel free. I love this to be interactive as much as you guys would like. Okay. Yeah, go for it, Lauren.
I was also going to say, also feel free to throw questions into the chat, and I'll make sure that Raya sees those as well.
Yeah, that's an awesome idea. Yeah, thank you. I always forget that feature exists. So tech savvy. Yeah, and something else I want to just bring up, you guys, and I don't think it's talked about enough, is mental health. It's just dealing with everything we have to deal with, especially I think being a teenager and being a young adult, when I feel like life can be super chaotic. So specifically talking about mental health and entrepreneurship and what I talk about, for me, photography was an incredible vehicle to help me get through some of those really challenging times in my life, times when I didn't really want to hang out with my friends or go out exploring with them, but because I had the camera, it was something that I could kind of help do to motivate me. So sometimes we have to look at our passions and our hobbies, or be really determined to go find something that we can sort of latch onto that's going to help us just kind of move through some of the harder times in life. Some of us have siblings, and that can be really challenging. Some of us have complicated parent relationships, and that can be really challenging. Sometimes school feels super overwhelming. So I think really tapping in and paying attention and just asking yourself, like, what brings me joy? What do I do that I just simply love? And doing that as much as possible. And that can be hard when you're young, because sometimes it's not what your friends also enjoy, or you don't want to stand out. And that's valid, and that's okay. And there's no right way to move through young adult and being a teenager. But coming from someone who remembers it clearly and is feeling like I'm finally coming out the other end, I think me being steadfast in my decisions to do things that were a little unconventional, or things that maybe people didn't approve of, but for me really lit me up, is something I know I'm not going to regret ever in life. And I think I may have regretted not deciding to go to a different high school, or not studying something I wanted to in college, or not starting my business, all based out of fear or other people's opinions of me. The older I get, I find people really respect and value other people for boldly taking action, for doing things that are a little bit unconventional or a little bit outside of the herd. Like, I remember in college, the class bell would ring and you'd see all of the kids just in like a herd, right, going from one classroom to the next. But then you might see a kid that decides to take a different route. And so sometimes that kid might be looked at, but maybe he's found a better way to get to that other classroom. Maybe he's listening to music and just enjoys that other path without the herd. And so sometimes knowing that it's okay to not follow the herd, and often it's later that, you know, sometimes my friends who maybe thought nothing of me will message me and say, hey, just want to let you know, like, I love watching you. I'm so inspired by your journey. And so that's another thing, you guys, right? Like, me starting my business, is not just about me and my life. It's about hopefully sharing with others, hey, you can also do something that maybe you've always wanted to do, but you were scared to do, or that you wanted to do, but everyone told you you can't make money doing that. So remembering sometimes it's not about us, and sometimes it's being selfish to not go after our journey, right? Because then we are blocking we're not helping other people see what's possible. Let me see what else. Yeah, maybe Lauren, we can see if anyone wants to unmute and chat, and then I just feel like I can then maybe speak more specific to anyone's thoughts that might be valuable.
Yeah, that sounds great.
Okay.
So
or even if you have things that, that's always fun. Little
okay.
interview action.
So what were some of the biggest challenges other than kind of what you said, where you were going with your gut instincts and you had all these other people telling you to do something else? What was, another huge challenge that you faced when starting your own business?
Yeah, I always say it was the biggest amount of fear and freedom I had at the exact same time. When you start your business, you remove a lot of identities that you were able to have before. So when I worked for this hotel company, I had a title, I had a salary, I had coworkers, I had a boss telling me how I was doing. There was a lot of external validation and external people telling me and reminding me that I was good, that I was doing a good job, and that I was a worthy human being. And I'll even bring it back to when you're in school. You have your teachers or your professors telling you how you're doing. You have grades. And so you have all of these identities and reassuring external factors letting you know how you're doing. When you leave all that and decide to go after what it is you want to do and create a business, you choose to give up all of that temporarily. And that can be incredibly scary, especially for me. I realized in that moment, I learned that lesson of we are worthy simply by being here, right? By being born, by being humans. We don't have to gain our worth in any way. Because in that moment, when I had left my job and before I got any clients, I had nothing. I had no job, very little money, no boss. I had nothing. I had nothing on my calendar, and I was simply laying there. I remember it was a February super rainy day, downtown Portsmouth apartment. I was just laying there on my bed, and then I realized I still was worthy, even though I felt in that moment I was just nothing. And in remembering that our work is important, but it's also only one part of us in this world. Just like our friends are important, family, etc., but they don't make up all of who we are, because those things continue to shift and change, and we have different relationships with them as we go through life. But that doesn't have a direct reflect on or impact on our self-worth here as humans.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I have more questions, but does anybody else have questions?
And if you guys don't want to talk, you can throw them in the chat. I'll also mention, you guys, I have a podcast. It's called Behind the Assignment. And I do that with my partner, Miles. He's a videographer. And on that podcast, we are specifically talking, and it's geared toward young creative entrepreneurs, helping take their passion and turn it into profit. So there's a lot of amazing episodes on there, specifically about starting a business, even about the equipment we use, social media, our relationship. There's a bunch, and there's 24 episodes out. So that's something that will be a fun extension off of this conversation you guys can tune into.
So one of the things we have you slated to talk about is how do you brand yourself?
Yeah,
What does that look
great.
like?
Yeah. So super powerful, you guys. Like when I was in college, I something my journalism professor said to me that has always stuck with me is that we have the privilege to publish things. Like not always in life have we had this opportunity to be able to publish things so effortlessly and affordably. Um, so that's something to just remember, that the power we have to put ourselves out there and to monetize that, right, to make money off of the things that we love to do and the things that, just who we are, is it's incredibly important to take advantage of that, because it hasn't been the reality forever. So when it comes to self branding, it's really, that's a fancy word for, honestly, it's looking at what do I feel like I'm innately good at. So that means, what do I feel like I'm just good at? What do I enjoy? What can I talk about all the time and you feel like you know a lot about? And just putting that out there online. So if it's baking, you love to bake, you love to read cookbooks, you love to share that with other people, put that out there. And know that if you like baking, you also may like crocheting, and those don't live separately. You can put those both out there. And so you become known as someone who likes to do this and likes to do that, and you share about that. And so from the outside audience perspective, you become a valuable resource. You become an expert in that. You become a place where people know they can go to ingest this information and to learn from. And so by you providing value, simply by sharing things you already love to do, you can build an audience through that. And when you build an audience, they become your loyal cheerleader fan base. And so whenever you start something new or different, they follow you because they like who you are. So to talk about specifically with me and my business, I started People of Portsmouth, which is a passion project I started while working at the hotel, where I interviewed people I didn't know on the streets of Portsmouth. I took their picture and I put it online. I built this huge community that when I had started my business a few years later, they all followed me. And that was a huge leverage for me to then monetize my photography. And I didn't do People of Portsmouth to make money. I didn't make any money doing that project, but the people I shot would then come to me and they turned into clients. So self-branding doesn't need to be complicated, but it's really getting over our own sort of fear of being seen, and our own fear of owning the things that we are good at and that we enjoy, which is incredibly scary and hard for a lot of people. It was for me, certainly. It's something I practiced, and I realized if I wanted to ever make money and be good at photography, I had to get over that, and I had to simply start to show up every single day and be more comfortable being in front of the camera and sharing my story. So start really small, start in micro little steps to put yourself out there, and just keep doing that.
Thanks. We have a question in the chat. And I think a lot of people actually probably have that same question. What are some of the basic steps of just going about starting an actual business?
Yeah, that's great. And again, Dan, thanks for joining for your granddaughter. And the podcast might be awesome resource for her, and even just following me on social media, because I talk so much about business as well as sharing my photography. But to answer this question, I think back to what were like the instrumental steps that kind of became game changers for me. And it really wasn't as complicated. It isn't as complicated, I think, as people think. Definitely, it wasn't actually as complicated as I thought it was going to be looking back, because I have no background in business. I'm the first in my family to start a business. I was actually terrified of business and all of that stuff, and that's why I studied journalism, because I thought it's the furthest thing away from business that I could get. Here I am, and that's sometimes what the world deals you with. But I would say if she could start a passion project, I think that would be amazing. So anything that she and if it's specifically with photography, so anything she wants to sort of hone in on and create this project around it, or if it's not photography and maybe any other business, just simply a way to expose her work is the key point. So with photography, passion projects allow for a lot of exposure, which is key. I think if we can withstand enough exposure of what it takes to get seen, that's how we can kind of break into the industry. A lot of people try, but they don't get exposed for long enough, and then so they don't think it's working and they stop. I think it's 87% of photography businesses fail. I saw that statistic somewhere. And I think part of that is they just won't, they can't withstand the exposure that it takes. And often that's about 6 months, I think, if not a little more. So passion project is one. Two, it's networking groups. So as a 25-year-old, I walked into rooms of people where I was absolutely the youngest, people who looked at me thinking, this girl's not gonna maybe make it. What is she even trying to do? So that's another one, networking. And then the third thing for me was really when I started to get very specific about the type of photography I was shooting, and really marketing myself as a very niched product, because I believe that's how you really see success, when you become known for something in your community and it's very obvious and very specific as to what you do, what you shoot. But I don't know if I'd recommend that at the very beginning, because sometimes you need and want to work with a wide breadth to, one, know even what you want to niche in on, and two, just to become also better at your craft. I hope that's helpful. And I love any follow-up questions, Dan, if you have any. Awesome, thank you. That's a great question.
Yeah, I think your point about finding a niche within an industry is like not just photography. I think that's across the board with really anything now. It's so helpful, and I feel like I've seen some people just like fly with their careers after they like figured out what they were so good at and just like hone that as much as they can.
Yeah, I think part of the fear in niching in is that scarcity mindset of just thinking there won't be enough if I only do this, or just like, who am I to say if I make ceramics, I'm only making a very certain type. But gosh, there's so many people there's going to be too many people still that are going to want, even as a brand photographer that's very specific as to the type of even brands I work with, I still have too much work. So imagine if I'm a photographer, I do it all. I mean, it's silly. If you think even about surgeons, they specialize in very specific things. I think being an artist, there shouldn't be a difference in that. So get very, very specific so people understand and know what to hire you for.
So I was wondering, at your charter school, did you take photography classes? And then when you got to UNH, were you taking photography classes? Or was that something that you did completely outside of the school world?
Yeah, great question, Lauren. I would say a little hybrid of both. I've actually never taken a formal class in the work I do now. Never taken a photography class. I'm self-taught, and so I share that because I think we use education sometimes as an excuse as to why we can't own what it is we want to do in the world. Not knocking education. I completely believe in higher education, and I think we should all take advantage of that if possible. But to understand there's an immense power in the internet and our own desire to become good at something. And so, it can be, I can say I built this business off of little to no education. But with that said, I took advantage of the resources I had available to me in high school. So I started a yearbook club with my best friend, the one who introduced me to photography. So I took, I figured out what can I do here to help my own passion, my own interests, also help the school, also gain some leadership skills So I was able to use the resources at my school, use the organization, use my teachers to help build this yearbook club. And then I was able to shoot. And so something I could put on my college resume, but also something where I could practice my skill. So maybe thinking about in high school specifically, or middle school, wherever you're at, you know, how can you take advantage in the best way of the situation you are in and utilize what's available to you. A side note I did want to mention that I hadn't is ask your teachers, or if you have maybe a career person, if they can help you shadow with someone who you want to be in that industry of. That will be a huge way for you to, one, see if you even are interested as much as you think you are. Sometimes we think we want to be something, but we don't really actually know what that looks like in the real world. So just going back to like, how can you use the time you're in currently? If you don't love school, but you have to be in it anyway, how can you use this moment you're in to help in the future? Maybe building your business in the future. And then in college, I joined a lot of clubs and organizations, the newspaper, the creative magazine, and was able to really push my skill forward quite a lot in those more sort of professional setting, again with a lot of resources. I already was paying a student activity fee, which a lot of students pay when you go to college, and so I was paying, it was something $300 a year. So I thought, you know, why not make sure I'm joining these organizations that my fee is going to, and becoming better and building the network and all of that. Yeah, so take advantage, you guys, and ask if you don't even know what that, you know, how that even starts. It's maybe just asking your teachers like, hey, I'm really interested in this. How do you think I can, is there any way through school you guys can help me get better at it, or I can help explore other options with it? Because school is so much more, right, than the classes we are part of. I didn't always understand that, but it's really to help us push other parts of our life forward, not just academically. It's so much bigger than that. And the teachers are working for you. They're there to help you.
We have another question in our chat from Dan. Have you done or continue to do more of passion projects?
Good question, Dan. If I had more time. So what's brilliant is that I now get paid to be a photographer, which is a dream come true, but also the things that really light my heart on fire. I've realized I documented the Black Lives Matter, one of the marches in Portsmouth, and that really lit me up. And I obviously think due to journalism and storytelling and news telling and all of that. And it reminded me of the type of photography that I really just fall in love with. And again, with people of Portsmouth, it was a lot of that sort of telling real stories, documenting people in their moment, vulnerable stories, ones that we connect with on a human level. I've interviewed over 400 people with people of Portsmouth, but when I started to get busy and started to get traction in my business, that really just went to the wayside, and it's so sad. But that's sometimes what passion projects do. They lead you into such a great space. I would love to, perhaps, because I still have family in the Middle East, my dad and my siblings live there. I think I have a unique access to a lot of the areas that most other people don't. So I dream about one day partnering with Nat Geo. They send me to the Middle East and I go to villages and I take photos, and who knows if this will happen, but we'll see.
I think that's a lot of photographers' dreams, to work for Nat Geo, huh?
Yes, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
It's so funny. I'll actually put, if y'all are interested, I'll put the People of Portsmouth link in the chat box. It mostly lives on Facebook and Instagram, so I'll just put the Facebook link. And if you just want to cuddle up with a cup of coffee on a Sunday morning, you might get some tears rolling down your cheeks. There's some good stories in there.
Maybe also share your podcast. I think that's a
Yeah.
great thing people might
Yep.
want.
And we are working on season 3. So like I said, there's 24 episodes out, and then there will be soon another 12.
Mm-hmm.
I have a question.
Oh yeah, go for it, Avery.
Okay. So, do you have any tips on like leveraging social media for your business, I guess?
Oh my God, such a fabulous question. Yes. And that's something I think I did not mention when Dan asked me about like what are the steps, because social media was a huge piece in getting exposure for my business. So what I would do is I really thought about personally and professionally and having that balance, because people don't just hire someone because of the work they do or they can do or the product they have. They hire people because of who they are buying from. So other people can work with many other photographers. Some choose to work with me because of who I am. They see me on social media, they see my picture, they hear my voice, they see my videos. They just maybe like and resonate with who I am, and they want to hire me. So I understood from the very beginning, having a personal aspect to my social media and being willing to show up was going to be a game changer, because not a lot of other photographers were doing that. They were showing their work, but they were really staying behind the camera. And I was a shy person. I was a very private person, believe it or not, 5 years ago before I started my business. I realized very quickly, if I wanted to really make it in this industry, one that people could argue is hard to break into, I had to get over that, and I had to start showing up and sharing my story. So part of that's like sharing my upbringing, sharing my education, sharing why I do this work. So the personal side, huge. Second, professional side, sharing physical examples of your work. So I share a lot on my Instagram. You'll see a lot of client highlights I share. If you keep sharing the work you do and the work you want to do, that's the work you're going to continue to get. Specifically, if you guys are interested in photography here as a business, what's incredible about social media is you are creating the content that lives on there. So my clients are sharing my work constantly, because that's the point of the work I create. And so they tag me or they say photo buy, and then it's like this amazing cycle that continues, where my work is just seen by thousands and thousands of eyes. And then I guess a third piece off of that. So I said personal, sharing your personal stuff, sharing your professional stuff, but also providing value to your audience. So that might be, for me, I can help people with how to take their own photos on their phone, giving tips like that. Somewhere, or my podcast, right? That's a free, valuable thing I'm offering people. So people know to come to me, and they want to be on my social media because they know they're going to get a certain thing. They can expect a certain thing from me. I hope that makes sense. Feel free to add any follow-up questions, or if you want me to keep sharing about that. But again, like the privilege to publish, like people like back in the day who had businesses had to pay like thousands of dollars to get any sort of exposure. We can do it for free. And I think reminding especially the younger generation of this, like, take advantage of this very amazing free platform that you have to share your business, because it wasn't always like that. Like, you guys can literally start a business for $0. Like, that's incredible. And that wasn't always, right, the reality in this world.
What would you suggest for a good beginner photography and videography camera?
Good question, Avery. Again, I'm going to share stuff, but on the podcast, I literally have an episode that's titled the equipment we use. So tune into that if you don't have anything to write down. But I would say the term is called full frame cameras. So there's two types of professional cameras. One is like a crop sensor camera, which are going to be like the entry level, the least expensive options out there. I would say, honestly, I would not even bother with those. If I'm going to be completely honest, I would prefer you to just use your phone at that point, because the phone camera is incredible. If you have some money saved and you really are wanting to invest in something professionally, I would suggest any of the full frame cameras. So there's some that are going to be a little bit less expensive, but I wouldn't say anything less than a little over 2,000 is probably what you're going to spend at the very minimum. But also, and Avery, I think what's amazing is the full frame, any of the DSLR cameras, but the full frame specifically, you can do both video and photo. So it's like you're getting one product you're going to invest in that you can do these two beautiful mediums for. So kind of think of it like that too. You don't need to buy two separate equipment, which again is something like with technology that's been invented, that's pretty incredible. So I use a Nikon personally. My partner uses a Canon. They both are amazing, but I would say to really think about the glass, which is also known as the lenses, and that's going to be huge in the quality you can expect in your work, and focusing on the term prime lens. And so that's a fixed lens. That's one that doesn't zoom in or out. It's just one specific millimeter. So again, a lot of jargon, a lot of words, but my podcast, I break it down for you. So full frame camera and then investing in a prime lens would be the really best option for you.
So I don't know about you guys, but I'm a teenager. I don't have that much money.
Yeah,
So
heard.
so you're saying so
I
for
remember those
anything
days.
under $2,000, just go with like your phone camera?
Yeah, I mean, I would look into it, Avery, because I don't want to be the reason you don't get, something else. But from my
Yeah,
experience, yeah, I mean, from my experience, I did shoot on a crop sensor Nikon before I got my full frame. For a few years, I used that like kind of professionally in my work, and it was fine. So if you feel like you're like, there's no way I can shoot for the full frame, like that's way too expensive, there's no way, but I don't want to use my phone, I want to get a professional camera, then get a crop sensor. Like that's totally fine. I think I mentioned this because I didn't like realize that there was a difference, and I didn't realize full frames exist. And I just thought like my work was like I like couldn't figure out why I wasn't shooting better than I feel like I could be shooting. And it was because my equipment wasn't like matching my skill level. But I get the freaking teenage thing. It sucks. It sucks not having money, especially when it's like, if you had it, it would be going to a really good place. But I'll throw a little hardball at you, Avery. I don't know your situation. I don't know your circumstances, but I will say sometimes it takes sacrifice and being uncomfortable temporarily for the greater good. So if possible, it may be saying to your friends, yo, as much as I want to do this, I need to work on getting my full frame camera because I'm creating a business where I'm going to make a lot of money. You know what I mean? So sometimes it's just getting creative. I didn't hang out with friends for the first like year when I started my business. I literally like told all of them to leave me alone because I needed to focus every amount of energy and money and everything I had to giving my business a fighting chance. That's a little mom words for you, Avery.
cool. Thank you.
Oh, also used equipment, Avery. Like you don't need to buy new camera equipment. You can maybe go online and find some like really good, inexpensive, used full frame cameras, stuff like that.
Is there like any specific site, or is just like eBay or something?
You could do eBay. I use Hunts, which is they have a spot in Melrose as well as Manchester. And sometimes I just want to go and speak to a human and pick up and try equipment. And they're like knowledgeable there and stuff. And sometimes you can go and just be like, listen, I don't know much, but can you help me? this, even asking the same question you asked me, and they'll perhaps have even a more eloquent answer and maybe let you like try some in the stores and stuff like that.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'd also add, if you have any family members or friends who already have that equipment, asking to borrow it whenever you can, like, get your hands on it. That's another great way to, or like if you know there's a club, like a photography club or something at school, or maybe school paper, and they have a really good camera, just like make your way into that club or that group or whoever it is that you know has something nice, and try to use it as much as you can.
Yeah, I borrowed my best friend Shelby's camera for like a year before I even bought my own, and that's a good point. Yeah. Oh, awesome. Dan just gave a great resource, you guys, in the chat for used camera stuff. So that's awesome.
Okay, as a librarian, I have to ask, are there any books or any kind of like specific online resources that you've used to get to where you are in your career?
Yes, good question. Well, yeah, I'll mention Lauren and I, when we first were chatting about this, I mentioned my love for Hoopla, which you guys maybe all know about, but you guys can look up audiobooks and things like this. So I love that, because I'm all about doing things that are practical, using what already is there and available to you guys. So I love that for audiobooks. And I'll say a specific author that really helps me with the mindset piece of my work is Peta Kelly. I'll just type that here in the chat. She lives in Australia. She's an entrepreneur, she's an author, a thought leader, and she really talks a lot about the stories that are inherited to us, meaning the ones that are just passed down, the ones that are told to us, the ones we think we believe about ourselves and our world, and really just allows and invites us to question those and if they're true. And then she talks a lot about self-liberation, just meaning again, going back to being able to be that person who's walking their own little path when there's the herd, and tuning into that intuition and that gut reaction and that gut feeling of the direction you want to take in your life. So she has some audiobooks as well as hardcover and stuff like that.
Thanks for sharing.
Yeah.
Do we have any other questions anything at all you want to ask Raya?
I'm not mean, I promise. Yeah, The Artist's Way Every Day is another resource I loved. I mean, I think specifically anything, if it's specific to photography or art or whatever you guys are on this call that for, is finding other people who have done it before you, because it can feel like a very lonely journey sometimes and a little bit isolating, especially if your friends are doing something more traditional. So I really leaned into those sorts of resources when I felt very alone in the work I do, especially at the beginning. Just being reassured that you're not crazy in what you're doing will work.
Do you use any like photography or videography drones or anything for your work?
Yeah, good question, Avery. My partner Miles, he has a Mavic DJI or whatever. He uses that for his work. I don't mess around with drones. I have flown his before and it landed into a lake, so I had to get him a new one. It was the worst, and it went like full throttle, like all the energy possible, nosedive. No, they're not waterproof. No, drones are great. I will just say, I think you just have to be aware, like he's accidentally flown his into a building before and like it was kind of a deal. So just be careful and be aware, and There are some legal things around it, not trying to scare, just trying to, just kind of know where you're flying and make sure it's safe and that sort of stuff. And yeah, if you have any questions though, you can follow my partner Seco Splash on Instagram. And you can always DM him if you need any help with drone stuff.
And we have one more question in our chat.
Yeah. So Dan, that's a good question. I would say any Pulitzer Prize sort of photographs. And I specifically say like that because I tell people it's not about the equipment, it's not about the education we have in it. It's sometimes about being at the right place at the right time, putting yourself in vulnerable situations, getting into the room, getting closer than you think you should. I say if I don't get in trouble once during my photo shoots, I haven't pushed myself far enough. So when it comes to the people I am inspired by and I look up to, it's people who are willing to put themselves in those situations, because specifically as photographers, our work here in this world is so vital to history, to storytelling, to documentation, to helping move the world forward. Anytime you see the news talking about a historical event, if they don't have video or photo footage to accompany by, how will the world sort of be able to wrap their head around it or understand what actually happened? Emotions are what moves the world forward, and I think photos can do that in the most effective, easy way. So that is a roundabout, not clear answer to your question, Dan, but maybe I have to think about it more. But I know I went to the museum in DC, and just walking through those that gallery of the Pulitzer Prize winning photos, they were the most technically awful photos, right? They were blurry, they were out of focus, they were dark, they were not exposed, but it was what they were able to capture. That makes an amazing photographer. Yeah, I'm not sure if I recognize this name. Let me look him up real quick. See, this is where I fall short if I went to if I studied photography. American photojournalist. Got you. Yeah, maybe if I looked at his work, I would recognize him. So he did a lot of work with what am I seeing? AIDS, and then a lot of traveling. Yeah. Yeah, that's incredible. I think that's what my heart would really get lit up by. That sort of stuff. Known as the war photographer. Oh, interesting. Yeah. Very cool. Thanks for sharing.
Well, do we have any other questions? We've reached 7:30. We did start a couple minutes late, so we have little time left. Cool. All right. Well, thank you so much, Raya.
Yeah.
I think you gave us so much information, and you gave us some more places that we could go to seek more information, which is so great.
Yeah, thanks so much.
And yeah, so if anybody has any questions, you can email me. My email is youthlibrariannhpl@gmail.com. I'll throw that in there. I am the youth librarian, which I forgot to introduce myself at the beginning. I was too excited introducing Raya, but I'm here, and Raya has her email on her website. You can DM her through all of her social media sites. So
yes,
to find. And thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you guys so much. I appreciate it so much. Keep in touch if I can support in any way.
All right, have a good night.
Thank you. Thanks, Lauren.
Thank you. Have a good one.
Thank you. Bye, Avery.